Welcome everyone to the Hurting Humanity channel. It is awfully quiet. Feels a lot like the calm before the storm. Now the question is the storm scripted to be Donald Trump becoming president and leading us into World War III? Or is the storm that's coming something between now and Inauguration Day? Because if you're paying attention, and you've been paying attention over the last couple of years, you've probably noticed that we have been involved and invested in PSYOP after PSYOP after PSYOP. And when I say we're invested in it, it means that the PSYOPs are being thrown in our faces every single day. It's all that we hear about wherever we turn, because when they create these PSYOPs, whether or not you get sucked into it or not doesn't matter, because you're going to be exposed to it by the people around you, because the people around you are going to be talking about it, thinking that it's really happening. And we had all of these things, right? With Donald Trump being removed from the ballot, Donald Trump going on trial, Donald Trump being a convicted felon, Donald Trump this, Donald Trump that. And now that Donald Trump has been selected to be the president, all of a sudden we don't hear or see any government staged riots or protests. We don't hear government officials saying they demand a recount. We're supposed to believe that the quote-unquote Democratic Party is just laying down all of a sudden and nobody out there is suspicious that something bigger is coming. Now, again, it could be something before he's inaugurated, and if it's not, it tells us that Donald Trump going in as president of the United States is and has been the plan all along to bring America's to its knees, because then they can blame all of the conservatives, all of the Christians, and all of the people and say it was the will of the people to put this man in power. We warned you. The celebrities warned you. All of these people on television who know about the world, who are fake media reporters and journalists, we warned you, and still you voted him in, and now America's getting what it deserves. It's going into World War III. Civilians are getting stripped of their rights. Maybe even possibly we'll see what they call in the wrestling world a Donald Trump heel turn, when he'll turn on all of his followers, all of his MAGA supporters, and tell them he was the snake from the beginning. That's very, very possible. But also what is possible is something happening before the inauguration, which I talked about in a previous video. And I thought it was pretty suspicious that Time Magazine already has a cover of Donald Trump, but they put the words President-elect Donald Trump. Now, is he currently president-elect? Well, I mean, it depends on how you view all this stuff. I call it president-select because the people didn't really elect him, and the people aren't really electing anyone. They're selecting who's going to be the president, and maybe a large majority of the people want him to be president, but still, he's selected to go about with the New World Order's plans. But president-elect is a person who's been elected president who has not yet taken office. So there's truth to that. But I thought it was very suspicious because Time Magazine always has covers that show us things to come or show us weird things in the wording, right? And to have it say president-elect, even though Donald Trump has been the president before, I thought was a little bit suspicious. It stood out to me because you don't often see a magazine cover say president-elect. It would say the next president of the United States, Donald Trump. So they want you to remember that he's only president-elect because everybody knows that the term president-elect means he was elected, but he ain't the president just yet. Hold on. And you might remember Time Magazine's cover with Donald Trump that said in trouble, that had him stuck in his golf cart in a bunker on a golf course right before that second assassination attempt on Donald Trump's life, which of course was not real. And I've mentioned it so many times, when you feel and see all this stuff going on, it's very easy, even if you're aware of the psychosis, to feel kind of drawn in and say, okay, maybe they'll leave us alone for a little while. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we really do elect the president. And just remind yourself, if you feel like you're getting sucked in and you're saying to yourself, well, it's the lesser of two evils, I'd rather have Donald Trump as president than Kamala Harris. Maybe we'll have lower prices at the grocery store, those types of things that can automatically, because we're in a psychosis here. If you follow the news, you follow any of this stuff, it can automatically obviously affect you and make you say, fine, I'd rather have that. I'm already worn out and I'm exhausted from all this stuff. Remind yourself of those two assassination attempts, because that should be the thing that continues to make people say, he's one of them. He's one of them. This isn't up for debate. Okay, they would never have missed the attempt on his life. And all of the things that they have done out in the open, which have martyred him, which have gained him more support, have been done by design, right? So we have the Time magazine cover now, and we had the In Trouble Time magazine. And then remember, we had the January 6th committee. These are all things that have happened over the last year or two, right? The tracking states' efforts to remove Trump from the ballot. Remember all the states that were blocking him from the ballot? And then the Supreme Court restored Trump being on the ballot. Trump was he's still supposed to be sentenced, but now supposedly he won't be sentenced, right? The first convicted felon president of the United States. Now all of a sudden this guy Jack Smith, this actor, is winding down prosecutions against Trump. Wouldn't they be ramping up their efforts if this was real? If this was actually real, okay? And these people really wanted to imprison him. He was really going to go after the deep state and expose all this stuff. Why would they stop now? Why all of a sudden have things gotten so calm? But month after month after month after day after hour, every story over the last 4 years has been about keeping him out of office. And now we don't even have questions about the outcome of the election. In 2016, we did. In 2016, we had Hillary Clinton and Trump and all this Russian collusion talk, right? Don't you think they would be going forward with the criminal prosecution saying, wait a minute, there's still a chance Trump won't be president because there's a chance that he's going to end up in prison or he'll be president from jail, or we could do this or we could do that, right? Or how about this with Jamie Raskin? If you're not familiar with this guy, this summarizes how fake we all know and should know elections actually are. This guy from the Maryland district continues, and it's the same with all of them. You look at these guys like Schumer, right? Pelosi, all these people over the years. There's no way anyone is continually reelecting these people. Okay, there's no way. And this guy got 80% of the reported vote. This guy is one of the biggest clowns that we've ever seen in Congress. And somehow we're supposed to believe that it's the people who keep putting him in power. It's not rigged/fake. This is Jamie Raskin. Some of you have probably seen this before, but it's worth noting, talking about how it was going to be their job to prevent him from going into office in January of 2025. How it's going to be Congress's job to ultimately reverse the decision of the people, and how this would bring about a civil war. If you haven't heard this interview, listen to him talking about this.
I was most worried about the Supreme Court's prospective imminent abdication of its very clear duty to disqualify Donald Trump from the ballot under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, and what that might mean if their decision says that it's really up to Congress on January 5th or January 6th, 2025, to disqualify him at the counting of the Electoral College votes, which really could lead to something akin to civil war, if that's what the suggestion is, which is what I think I heard when I went to the oral argument, that they themselves were unwilling to rule whether or not the Colorado Supreme Court was correct in finding that he had engaged in insurrection on January 6, 2021. So, but that was just last night. We got to play defense and offense in 2024. The right to vote is under attack in very specific ways in lots of states, especially in some of the deep South states, especially in Florida, which I just returned from. There's just unbelievable stuff going on there. Like if you have to send a mail-in ballot or an absentee ballot, you have to have you can only have it taken to the mailbox or the polls by a member of your nuclear family who lives with you. Okay, so there's just a million traps for the unwary that are being set across the country. But at the same time, we do have to get on offense for the articulation of a constitutional right to vote that's meaningful for everybody in the country, the millions of people who are left out and disenfranchised, and for everybody whose right to vote is rendered vulnerable by this Supreme Court. And it's, I like very much the point that both Sherilyn and Rick have been making about the Supreme Court. I mean, we've got to remember that for the vast majority of American history, the Supreme Court has not been a friend to the people. It has been overwhelmingly in a reactionary or conservative mode. I mean, all the way up until the Civil War, what did the Supreme Court ever do for enslaved people in our country? Absolutely nothing other than cement their status in the Dred Scott decision, saying that African Americans had no rights that the white man was bound to respect. And then even after the Civil War, even after the Reconstruction Amendments in 1896 in Plessy versus Ferguson, constitutionalizing Jim Crow. And then it's not until the Warren Court for a couple of decades with the white primary cases and Brown versus Board where you get a different kind of Supreme Court on the side of the freedoms and equality of the American people. But the court is not going to save us. And so that means the only thing that really works is people in motion amending the Constitution. But again, it's necessary, but it's not sufficient, because what can be put into the Constitution can slip away from you very quickly. And the greatest example going on right now before our very eyes is Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, which they're just disappearing with a magic wand, as if it doesn't exist, even though it could not be clearer what it's stating. And so, they want to kick it to Congress. So it's going to be up to us on January 6, 2025, to tell the rampaging Trump mobs that he's disqualified. And then we need bodyguards for everybody in Civil War conditions, all because the 9 justices, not all of them, but these justices who have not many cases to look at every year, not that much work to do, a huge staff, great protection, simply do not want to do their job and interpret what the great 14th Amendment means. And I'm glad that Sherilyn's creating her new center so we can bring that back to life.
So that's definitely something people should still be paying attention to, right? So we're supposed to believe he was saying that months and months ago, and now he's conceding. Now the people in Congress who have done all these committees and all of these sham trials to gaslight the American people, now all of a sudden they're just stepping aside. Now all of a sudden they don't care that Donald Trump is going to be president because they believe in democracy. Well, they didn't believe in 2016 because they said that the election was rigged then. And just like conservatives in 2020 said it was rigged. So now all of a sudden, all the stuff that they've done, they're just waving a white flag, right? It's awfully quiet out there in the mainstream. So it is awfully quiet out there, which should make people very hesitant that something bigger is going to come, because that saying, the quiet before the storm, is true. And this is, for the way the media operates now, this is way too calm. This is way too silent. They should be gaslighting. They should be getting on the Democrats out there, telling them that the election was rigged and that there's missing ballots. And where are all these stories about ballot boxes being set on fire that we heard leading up to the election? Where's the the guy, what did I call him? The election box killer, the guy who was mysteriously, his license plate wasn't showing up on any cameras and he was just blowing up election boxes, and he had a background in metal, so he knew how to burn through. I mean, the stories that were out there were unbelievable. And now you hear nothing. Now you hear zilch. You don't even hear them trying to create psyops to plant seeds of doubt in the American people, right? Why is that? Nobody out there is suspicious about it. This is a media and a government that every single day spends every single second they have in a gaslighting us. Now what you're hearing is them saying, this is the will of the people. We believe in democracy. This is what they wanted, which could mean one of two things: that something's coming before Inauguration Day, or the plan all along was for Donald Trump to be the last president and to sabotage, be the one who sabotages America and brings them to their knees, the one who brings us into World War III. Because don't forget that narrative with Putin that's out there. Putin wasn't thrilled about Trump, that all of a sudden they're not best buddies. The narratives that are out there about Ukraine, the narratives that are out there about China, and of course, most importantly, the narrative of Israel and Iran, and how Trump will bring peace one way or the other. And Trump is directly aligned with Israel. And who else is aligned with Israel? The 501c3 churches that don't ever address the state of Israel versus Israel, God's people. They never address it. So everybody out there in their congregations who are getting taught this automatically are supporting Israel. They don't ever talk about the book of Revelation and the synagogue of Satan, ever, right? So there are many things that could occur between now and Inauguration Day, but it's so quiet. People out there should be thinking to themselves, this is really, really, really weird, because they never leave us alone. They never stop with the psychological hours. They never take a second out of their day to not try to manipulate us or work us. And the narrative that's really floating around is conceding that the Democrats have conceded. But all this time, for all these years, while they already had a Democrat in power, all we heard about was that Donald Trump, oh, we got to stop him, we got to stop him. Is that for them so that they can come out and say, look, we told you so, even though Trump is one of them, and they're trying to sabotage America and sabotage the infrastructure so that they can say that they told everybody so and that they can blame the Christian conservatives in this country when America comes to its knees? Or is it because they have something planned before Inauguration Day that would really bring about a civil war? Because one way or the other, and with all the narratives that are out there, the Civil War narrative is one that they've harped on so heavy over the last 10 years. They pushed it so heavy to make it like, if you believe this and your neighbor believes that, you can't even live near each other. And if somehow the Dems, the Democrats, whatever you want, the communists, take out Donald Trump, which would all be fake, he'd be getting sent on vacation, civil war would ensue. Because if the government came out and said, look, now we're going to select who the next president is, we have to have re-elections, we could put everything on pause and keep Biden in power, Biden could resign and Kamala could become president, the conservatives will go absolutely AWOL. They will separate. That will cause this country to separate into red and blue states because they're not going to deal with it now, especially after being told that they won. Something catastrophic has to happen, and it's coming. Everybody out there should be able to feel it. Is it Jamie Raskin's narrative about the government themselves without even doing a fake assassination attempt, potentially interfering? Because remember, December 17th matters. December 17th, where they do the Electoral College, that matters. Nothing is official until they do that. And then between that and Inauguration Day, nothing is actually official either. However, if something was to happen to Trump after December 17th, I believe then J.D. Vance could be put in power. But if something happens before then, there's no J.D. Vance backing up Donald Trump because the Electoral College never voted, because they never did confirm the election like you heard him talk about. And they said, well, we won't confirm the election, right? So would they do that without a fake assassination? Because remember I told you in the previous video, if you didn't see, what happens if a candidate dies or becomes incapacitated? There's no federally required process to follow. This is from the government website, okay? We don't know what would happen if a candidate who dies or becomes incapacitated between the meeting of electors and the counting of electoral votes in Congress. They don't know what the process is. The Constitution is silent on whether this candidate meets the definition of president-elect or vice president-elect. Confusion. The government taking away the civilians. Well, you all voted for him. He's no longer alive. So we're either going to give it to Kamala or we're going to vote ourselves for somebody. Maybe we'll put Barry Soetoro into power, a former president. Who knows what they have planned, but something is planned. This is not organic. Donald Trump did not win. The people do not have a say in who becomes the president. They do. And whether or not all the people wanted Donald Trump and that was their plan from the get-go, we'll find out. But we can guarantee if Donald Trump is put in power, that whole you'll never have to vote again, the last president theme is completely true. That'll be the end. But let's see if we get there first, because there's still a lot of things going on that are just very quiet right now that we know are in play. The third assassination attempt is potentially one of them, okay? All the videos I've done over the years, most of you have seen, right? With Johnny Depp and Madonna talking about blowing up the White House, assassinating a president, comparing him to Abraham Lincoln, the Abraham Lincoln theme with Donald Trump, always being in front of that Abraham Lincoln photo, right? And think about what it would mean now if it happened versus 3 months ago. Think about what it would mean now. It would mean utter chaos. The president-elect. This is a theme that we see with predictive programming, right? Who's the president? They blow up the Senate. Who's the president? We don't know who the president is. Who's going to be the next in line? The president said, the vice president said, who's going to be? The speaker's going to be. There's so many themes in predictive programming with absolute chaos ensuing with something happening to the president. Well, just imagine the president-elect, because there is nothing in the Constitution. They'd have to rewrite the Constitution. There's nothing in there. Again, let me repeat the sentence. The Constitution is silent on whether this candidate meets the definition of president-elect or vice president-elect if the candidate with the majority of the electoral votes is considered president-elect before the counting of electoral votes in Congress. We don't know what would happen if a candidate who dies or becomes incapacitated between the meeting of electors and the counting of electoral votes in Congress. There's no federally required process to follow if a candidate who is projected to receive electoral votes dies or becomes incapacitated. You talk about order out of chaos, that's it right there. That's order out of chaos, because we could say, well, Trump's put in as president, then they whack Trump. Well, then we know J.D. Vance becomes president, which wouldn't cause as much chaos, would it? Because the conservatives would be absolutely upset, but they'd still have power. So they would say, well, all right, they'll be crying and martyring Trump and treating him as, what they treat him as now as an idol. But they'd still say, well, we still have the House, we have the Senate. Well, what if now that they're telling you that the Republicans have the House, they have the Senate, now they have their president in place, and then everybody blames the deep state for doing something to Trump. And there's nothing in the Constitution that gives the conservatives the right to power and you talk about chaos. That's the blueprint for chaos. So pay attention to it. I'm not predicting anything by saying that this will happen or this won't happen. I think it's very clear that before Donald Trump's death on earth, as it's announced to us whenever that occurs, is not, they didn't do all this stuff with Trump so that Donald Trump eventually dies of old age like Jimmy Carter eventually. We think Jimmy Carter will. He's about 200 years old. He's the crypt keeper. He's the old man from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. He's the crypt keeper from Tales from the Crypt. It's scary to look at, right? When we were told Jimmy Carter was going to die 15 years ago from inoperable brain cancer, then, of course, his grandson was offered up, and Jimmy's just hanging in there, right? But Trump is not going to have a sending off like that, where they're just like, oh yeah, former President Donald Trump has died. They've built this up for something massive to happen to him. Whether he's in office or not is yet to be seen. But I do eventually believe that his cause of death will be, quote unquote, assassination. It will be fake. It will be staged. He will be sent somewhere because he is one of them, and chaos will ensue. It's just a question of timing. What timing would be perfect to cause order out of chaos? Would it be between now and the 17th of December? Would it be between now and Inauguration Day? Or would it be us engaging in World War III and something happening to President Trump? Only they know. It's their script. But pay close attention, because it is too quiet. And when it's quiet like this, and when the government isn't harassing you with psyops every day like it isn't right now today, and telling you that, oh man, the Dems are saying that election boxes were lit on fire, we can't trust it, we need a recount. That's what the people on social media are saying. The Democrats on social media are begging for recounts. But the mainstream media is not. And that's what you have to pay attention to, because they're the ones who create the narratives. So they don't want that narrative out there, or they're at least not pushing that narrative, because they're cutting you a little bit of a breather. They're letting everybody take it in and celebrate who's conservative. And then imagine if the rug gets pulled out from under them. We'll see how this plays out. I thank everybody for being here. Hope you're all doing well. God bless you and your families as always.